Hi, this is Nancy with On Point TV. Our next series is Quilt As You Go. Now, I've done Quilt As You Go for a long time, but the main reason I want to show it to you is because I have so many people ask me about it. They want to know how to do Quilt As You Go quilts because they want to finish the quilt themselves. Now, when you're making a queen size quilt, if you've not tried already, you will very quickly realize that to quilt it yourself on your regular domestic sewing machine is harrowing. It can be very difficult. You will seriously find muscles in your arms you didn't know you had. So that is why long arm quilting has become so popular, and there are so many really fabulous long arm quilters out there. But there's sometimes that you want to finish the quilt yourself, and that's why people want to learn Quilt As You Go. So I'm going to take you through some of the quilts that I've made and some of the different books that I've had over the years that have taught me these processes. The first one is one that is very new. These are from June Tailor. These are the Quilt As You Go series. Now, there's probably 15 in the series, different quilt designs, different battings. So this particular one is one that you'll be able to find that is pre-printed batting, and this would be technically for a table runner. So let me show you what the battings look like. She literally has printed it right on there. And this is with a cotton blend batting. So this would be my favorite kind. I like it when it's a cotton blend batting as opposed to a polyester, but the polyester works. So the June Tailor Quilt As You Go, there's one of them. But this is another one. This is one that I made, and I showed you a little while ago because we did the cable. We were learning how to do the stems, and I talked about that on this quilt. This is a June Tailor Quilt As You Go, and I want you to notice these sashings. That's what makes her technique unique. Now, I'm not going to take you through that step by step, but you can also see on the back, if you look really closely right here, here is the seam on the back of the quilt that tells you it's a Quilt As You Go technique. The next one is one that I probably made this 16 years ago, and it is still one of my all-time favorite quilts because it commemorates a couple of my cats. The book is from Jan Mullen, and the book was called Reverse Applique With No Brakez, and everything Jan Mullen does, I believe she was from New Zealand, always ended in a Z. She had a wonderful pattern line and a couple of really fun books. I don't know if this book is still available. Maybe you can find it on eBay or someplace, but it was a really cool book. The main part of the book was the idea of reverse applique. So like she has in the cover of the book, where she had printed backgrounds and then did full pieces of fabric on the top and then appliqued it around. So Quilt As You Go, reverse applique. All right. So when I did it on my quilt, you can see here, now this is my favorite one. That was my cat. That was Hallie. I actually quilted the name of the kitty right here in the side of each block. And this block, I made this black and white and orange pieced section. The green section went completely on top of it, and then I turned the edges in one of the gazillion ways that Jan Mullen gives you in the book. Now, putting the blocks together in this quilt was different than the June Tailor one. With these, the blocks were completely finished by themselves, and they were just butted together, and then you got to do these really funky, cool sashings. It was seriously fun to do. This was a really fun quilt to make, and I want to bring over the border. Look at the border. The border was strip pieced, and then this purple fabric was put on top of it like a traditional border and then turned under here. So if you get a chance to find Jan's book, this is a really, really fun project, and I like that it was Quilt As You Go. This book is historical. This is the very first quilt book I ever bought. It was in 1995, which means I've been quilting for at least 24 years, because before that I was doing most of my quilting out of magazine. I didn't know there were books out there, and I was very slow on the uptake on doing this stuff. So about 24 years ago, I bought this book. It is still one of my favorites. Now, Marty Michelle has a huge series of projects, books, patterns, templates. I mean, a seriously huge collection. And if you Google search Marty Michelle, you will find them. And Marty is spelled with an I, M-A-R-T-I, Michelle. Her most popular book to date is one that I own, but I couldn't find it in my studio. But I'm going to tell you about it, and maybe we'll get a little picture of it to put up here. It's called Machine Quilting in Sections. It is still in publication and still very popular and has really exceptional instructions on doing quilt as you go, but she calls it machine quilting in sections because she doesn't always just do one block at a time. I think probably in this book the thing that I love best is this section that she has on how to put borders on Quilt As You Go. Her instructions are impeccable. Absolutely fabulous. You will learn so much from this book, not just in Quilt As You Go, but even in machine quilting. So I highly recommend if you can find this book or the Machine Quilting in Sections. The last book is probably the book that we're going to use as most of the technique for putting together the quilt that we're going to do. This is Block by Block by Beth Donaldson. This is also a very old book. This is like the first edition of it because I know that the cover changed later on to a blue cover. So when you're looking for this one on eBay, because I don't believe it's still being published, it was done by the Patchwork Place or Martingale Publishing, and Beth Donaldson is the instructor. FYI, she is also the curator of the Quilt Museum at Michigan State University. Go Spartans. So this is the book that we will really use for the technique that we're going to work on. Here is the quilt that I made, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe, using Beth Donaldson's technique. Really simplified. You make your blocks and the way that they go together. Right? So what we're going to actually be working on it with is the quilted tiles. So our last series, we made the quilted tiles. So there's one of the blocks, and I'm in the process of making the blue and yellow one. When I did this, the reason I decided to do it Quilt As You Go is because the stitching down of the applique, I did invisible machine applique for stitching down the bias stems. And I find that when my blocks are, this is about an 18-inch block, that it is actually easier to do it applique quilting, so doing the applique and the quilting at the same time. But I certainly was not going to try to put this entire quilt under my machine to do the applique quilting. So doing it one block at a time. And it's really very cool too because it is a large block. So getting a large block to do this technique is going to make a very nice quilt pretty quickly because the blocks are so large. So on this quilt, you'll notice that I do not yet have the border on, and we'll do the border as part of the construction too. So our next segment will be talking about the sashings and how many different choices of sashings there are, the proper way to cut sashings. You might not know that there is a proper way and an improper way to cut your sashings, and then I'll start taking you through the Quilt As You Go techniques.